Excelsior, true believers! You are about to embark upon a journey, a trip to the 70s and 80s when mighty Marvel Comics ruled over all. The Defenders, Doctor Strange, the Champions, Deathlock, the Submariner, the Incredible Hulk, Killraven, the Son of Satan, the Macabre Man-Thing, and all your other Bronze Age favorites every week appearing on Defenders Dialogue. Now here are your guides, Christopher Golden and Brian Keene.
Excelsior, true believers.
Excelsior indeed, and welcome back again after a short delay to Defenders Dialogue. I'm Brian Keene.
And I'm Christopher Golden. And Brian, come hell or high water, we will get to episode 152. But this, my friend, this is episode 150 of Defenders Dialogue.
That's right. And as suiting such a milestone, we're talking today about a milestone of Bronze Age Marvel, 1980s Marvel, and that is the Falcon 4-issue miniseries.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I found most interesting about this, the Falcon had been introduced in the pages of Captain America, and he quickly became Captain America's sidekick in those days. That was the typical nomenclature. You'd not partner. He was his partner, but
right. We
all would think of him as his sidekick. In the Silver Age, he had Bucky,
right,
as his sidekick from World War II. But the one that was more important to us in our age group was by far the Falcon.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know about you. I first discovered the character in 1976 during Jack Kirby's run on Captain America and the Falcon. So he's one of the very first Marvel superheroes I encountered. But, you bring up a point, sidekick versus partner. Even back then, when Kirby was writing these two characters, and look, Kirby's portrayal of the Falcon was very much a middle-aged white guy trying to write a 1970s hip person of color.
Right.
It's all there in the dialogue, and it's comical to go back and read it now. But even then, when Cap and the Falcon would talk, Cap would refer to him as partner, not as sidekick, but as, hey, partner, which that meant nothing to me as an 8-year-old. But as an adult going back and rereading those, it's like, wow,
yeah,
there it was, an effort to show that, they're equals. And
yeah, absolutely. And again, like it's fair to say that they definitely were partners. And this was an era where, in order to try to nudge sales a little bit, Marvel did these team up books. It was Captain America and the Falcon, just like it was Daredevil and the Black Widow.
Yep.
In the pardon me, my allergies are killing me. In the pages of the Daredevil series, the title of the series became Daredevil and the Black Widow.
Yep.
And Black Widow was his partner, but since Daredevil was the headline character, picking up the comic, you perceived Black Widow as his sidekick, which is certainly not the case. I mean, Falcon was not Robin. Black Widow was not Robin in a Batman comic.
Yeah. Now, eventually, Falcon disappeared from the pages of Captain America. Black Widow, of course, disappeared from the pages of Daredevil. Falcon, he showed up in a Marvel Spotlight, a Marvel premiere, the Defenders when they did the Defender for a Day storyline.
Yeah.
But that was it until this miniseries came along.
Yeah. Yeah. And the one thing I will say before we proceed to the miniseries is that I know I've said this on the show before, but in the Mego Marvel action figures, the Falcon was the best one.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Falcon was the best, my favorite of my Mego action figures. And I don't know why. It might have been the boots. I don't know. But it also should be noted that this is an early script. These issues are written by a writer named Jim Owsley, who later changed his name to Christopher Priest, who's known now just as Priest in comics.
Yep.
But interestingly enough, most people who run across Christopher Priest now, when he's writing Vampirella or previously Black Panther, and he's known for so much of that stuff, a very prominent black voice in comics in this era under the name Jim Owsley. And so I don't know if this is the first time a black writer wrote the Falcon, but it's certainly the first time it happened in a prominent story like this.
I believe it is. I don't want to go on the record as saying it is, but I'm 99.9% certain that it is. And before we delve into it, one other thing that we didn't touch on at the beginning. I apologize to listeners if I sound a little different. Please don't adjust your volume. I am getting over Bell's palsy, which is why Chris and I haven't recorded for a few weeks. If we had tried recording this show even 3 weeks ago, I'd love to talk like this, succotash, and that wouldn't have been entertaining to listen to at all.
Well, it might have been.
Yeah. So if I slur a little today, I'm not drunk. I am. It's 10:25 in the morning. Of course I am. But
you have to be drunk. Yeah.
All right. So Falcon issue number 1.
Yeah, written by Jim Owsley and penciled by Paul Smith, with inks by legendary Vince Colletta. And it's really interesting because we're looking at this character of the Falcon, whose name is Sam Wilson, and he's a social worker in New York City. Pardon me, God, my allergies are killing me. So we begin with a guy named Miguel Martinez, and he and his 2 buddies are harassing a woman named Lucia, in a back alley, and bad things are about to happen to this woman. And one of the things I find really interesting about this story, Brian, since we're not going to really go beat for beat, is Miguel Martinez is about to, I think, rape this woman with his buddy.
Oh, yeah. It's very clear he's about to.
And Red Wing, the Falcon's Falcon, basically interferes, and then the Falcon shows up. He whacks a couple of these guys aside, but he knows Miguel. And basically this comes off as Miguel is so frustrated with life in the ghetto that nothing means anything. And so he feels like he should be able to do anything and whatever he wants because of that.
Yep.
And as the story goes on, I must say I'm disturbed by the way that the Falcon lets Miguel off the hook for what he was about to do in that opening scene.
Well, it's an ongoing issue throughout the series, in how the Falcon chooses to mete out justice and who he chooses to mete it out to. I really like the push and pull internally in the character of Sam Wilson, the Falcon, in this regard. Miguel, as we find out, he cleans up his act. He tries to go straight. What he was about to do was heinous, but he's a product of his environment and his upbringing, and the ghetto. And we see that, particularly in issue 3, when the riot breaks out against the police. There's an accidental police shooting of a person of color. Huge riot breaks out, and Falcon's approach to those gang members is very similar in his approach here to Miguel, right. To the point where everybody has the same reaction that you did as a reader. The gangbangers call him an Oreo. And we get the Marvel editorial caption explaining, basically it's black on the outside, white on the inside. The white cops think he's letting them off too easy. There's even a conversation between him and Cap about it, if I remember correctly. Right. But you contrast that with, of course, the series' main villain, which is, of course, Electro. And Falcon's way of dealing justice to him is very, very different.
Yeah. We'll get to. Yeah, I think it's really, it's a really interesting read, and I think that it would not be that much different if it were written today.
Yeah.
But I do feel I just feel like it, for me at least, I would have liked a little bit more in terms of the Falcons. When the riot is breaking out, I understood that way more.
Right.
Because you're furious at authority, you're furious at police, you're furious at your situation and all of that. But it's in this case when they're about to rape this woman, to me, that's not you're not reacting against something.
Right.
But anyway, that's neither here nor there. We introduced.
Yeah, I was going to say, after Miguel, we introduced one of my favorite supporting characters of all time. He's right up there with.
I knew this guy was going to be right up your alley. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, he's up there with Jack Norris from the Defenders, and that is Sergeant Torque. He is very much a 1980s movie cop. Every panel you see him, he has his trusty double gauge shotgun. He's got the mullet hair, the long droopy mustache.
Yeah,
and he is Falcon's sidekick.
Yeah, he would have been. If they had made a movie of this in this era, he would have been played by young Mel Gibson.
Yeah, exactly.
He's a plainclothes cop who runs around the streets of New York, as you said, always with a fucking double-barrel shotgun in his hands somehow. And this doesn't seem to bother anybody. And he's that cop who breaks every rule.
Yep.
How many times in this course of this series does somebody say, "You can't do that," blah, blah, blah. And he's like, "I'm the police. I can do anything I want." Which is ironic because Jim Owsley's giving us this cop that is the fictional hero cop who does whatever he wants and breaks every rule, in the same story in which he's giving us more sort of real life cops who don't care about the people they're policing. I'm just saying, like in this story,
right?
That there's a protest against their behavior, where it just seems like a weird dichotomy to me that you have this character, but he's a really fun character. But he is. I
like the dichotomy, and I like the fact that at the end, in the final issue, we see a little bit of Torque's home life, and he's completely alone. He has nothing, no one except his shotgun. What I liked about this, and keep in mind, folks, this was a few years before Frank Miller on Daredevil and Peter David on the Hulk, and where comics got a little more adult, a little darker. There is no black and white here as far as morality goes. It's all shades of gray, except for maybe Captain America and Electro. One of them is clearly bad, one's clearly good. But even the Falcon, it's all shades of gray here.
Absolutely, the Falcon is clearly represented as a guy trying to do his best, trying to sort of figure out a way forward in a morass of gray.
Yeah.
Again, similarly, we have when Falcon brings Lucia home to her father, she runs to her father. The police had called him, and she says, "I am untouched." And he says, "Thank God." The Falcon makes excuses for Miguel. He was drunk. That's not an excuse, but I hope you can be lenient on him. The father says, "I'm a proud man. Since coming to this country, I've been stripped of all else that might. This night they attempt to take my Lucia. This is all I have left, Lucia and my pride. So again, it's this, and I know it's the era, and I know I'm reacting from a different point of view, but it's this thing that the idea of ownership, like
Yep.
they attempted to rape his daughter, and it's about him.
Yep. Yep.
They attempted to take something from him.
Yep.
Anyway, I know I'm, call me whatever you want, but
I think it's stunning how Priest was able to slip this in during the Jim Shooter regime.
Right.
How he was able to slip all this nuance and stuff into the book. This was not your typical Marvel fare for that era.
Yeah.
And things like that you never saw pop up in other comics. Questions like that, moral quandaries like that.
Yeah. Yeah, then we get what the story is really about, which is essentially this slumlord, trying to gentrify Harlem.
Yeah.
And that's sort of really what this first issue is about anyway. Yeah. Anyway.
And yeah, like I said, I don't know that we need to break down every issue, but through the 4 issues, basically we see over and over again what kind of a force Falcon is in this neighborhood, what kind of a force Torque is in this neighborhood. In this issue, the slumlord calls him a lunatic because he fired a shotgun at a government housing project application process and told everybody to chill out. And, Falcon says, yeah, he may be a lunatic, but he's also one of the best things about this neighborhood. Right. Despite the fact that he's a cop that is willing to break the law to achieve his goals.
Right.
Just there again, the scene with Falcon in court, when they withdraw the complaint against Miguel, it's superheroics that don't involve just running around punching things and don't involve, like I said before, clear good versus evil and right versus wrong. It's
well, that is what's really interesting about this whole first issue, is that's all that it is. And in fact, if I recall correctly, I read a little bit about it. I'd have to refresh my memory because I read this originally when we were going to talk about it prior to your Bell's palsy. But this first issue was not written as the first issue of a miniseries.
Right.
And then that's why the other 3 issues are have a different art team, and they are completely different from the first issue, because all of a sudden they're much more sort of familiar superheroics. They still have Turk and they still have the sort of gray that we're talking about, but they become very different, especially once you introduce frickin' Electro as one of the villains. So first, Falcon's dealing with a Sentinel, Brian.
Yeah, yes.
So in the second issue the Falcon is pursued by a Sentinel because at this point in Marvel Comics, he was considered a mutant. I don't think that he is still considered a mutant in the pages of Marvel Comics.
I don't think he is now. But yeah, at the time it was suggested by Professor X that because Falcon had this telepathic link with Red Wing, that he was a mutant. I have a telepathic link with all 4 of my cats. That doesn't make me a mutant.
You are kind of a...
But yeah, the Sentinel issue, it was fun, but it doesn't really do anything to advance the story. It could have been a Marvel Spotlight appearance, a Marvel premiere appearance.
Yeah. There's not much to it, but again, I feel like the Sentinel is really only in the story because they needed to put something like that on the cover. Because the story continues to be about Sam Wilson operating in Harlem, trying to do his best for the people in the city, even though essentially him trying to do his best pisses off everybody.
Right.
Pisses off the people he's trying to help. It pisses off the police. It's also really interesting to me because I honestly found myself frustrated particularly with that first issue, because I love the Falcon so much, and I love when he's being Sam Wilson, and I love the part that I just described, which is him pissing off everybody in that way.
Right.
But I did find myself frustrated with that whole Miguel situation and with Lucia's father. And I know that that's because I can't shake myself out of my 2022 mindset.
Right.
You know, when I was a kid reading this comic, I didn't even notice that stuff.
Yeah, neither did I. This came out when we were both, early teenagers. None of that would have ever occurred to us. We just thought it was cool that it was Red Wing who took down the Sentinel, not the Falcon.
Right. Exactly. And I'm sure we both were like, I wish I had Red Wing. I want a Falcon pal. You know what? I'm gonna tangent here for a second. Have we ever talked about the monkeys they used to sell in the back of the comics?
I don't think we have on the show. I know we've talked about them between us, but not on the show.
When I was a kid, like a little kid, my dream was to have a monkey as a pet.
Same here. I
don't know why. I just thought it would be the coolest thing ever to have a monkey, as to like hang around, and the practical elements of owning a monkey never occurred to me. I just like, yes, I would like to have a monkey. But you could in those days actually order a live monkey from the back of a comic. People are going to think I'm making this up. People who don't know.
I will find one of those and I will include it on the YouTube version of this podcast. So
fantastic. So there is a story out there that Tom Snagoski sent my way because he's always been a little bit obsessed with monkeys. That a guy wrote his tale of actually having ordered and received a monkey, and he did research into it. And basically, they would go to the jungle and they would snatch monkeys and stick them in a box with holes in it and ship it. And many of these monkeys showed up dead. I'm not kidding. The monkeys showed up dead. They showed up malnourished in a box full of their own shit. This is all real. We got to find this thing. This is an incredible story. But this particular guy, having later done research into it, he did get a live monkey, and it became his best buddy and sidekick. But he tells the story of when it first arrived, he opened the box in his basement, in the playroom or whatever in his basement, and it immediately went up and like onto the pipes and stuff overhead.
Right.
And when he tried to get it down, it basically like ripped his arm open.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, it's a crazy story. We'll have to look for it. But anyway, it's a weird segue from Red Wing to that. But as a comics reader, you see these things as a kid in the back of comics, your X-ray hypno specs and stuff like that. And it's all like, well, that stuff is crap. Even as a little kid, I knew that stuff wasn't going to work.
Oh, I didn't. I ordered every one of those.
Did you really?
I did. And most of them were crap. Most of them did not work. But the whoopee cushion always worked.
Well, whoopee cushion was always high comedy.
And the exploding gum and the fly in the ice cube, But yeah, the X-ray specs never worked.
No, and the other thing I liked was the little black smoke snake things that you'd light them and they'd serpentine out into snake form. People who don't know what I'm talking about think I'm high right now, but I know
you can still get those. You can get those at the fireworks store now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
But the monkey thing, we'll have to find. I want to put a link up to that story. I've got to find it.
All right.
All right.
Yeah, we should talk about issues 3 and 4 a little bit, because that's where Priest really seems to find his stride with this book. That of course introduces Electro as the big bad. As I said, Falcon drops by Torque's apartment. Or no, he comes home to his apartment and Torque's sitting there watching Letterman with the shotgun just laid casually across his lap.
Yeah, because where else is he going to put it? I mean, this is, and you're right in that issues 3 and 4, which are drawn by Mark Bright, are the issues in which Owsley finds the balance between a Marvel superhero comic and trying to write about the Falcon in the sort of gray way that he'd previously been trying to do.
Exactly.
If you did a Netflix TV series version of the Falcon or the Disney Plus version of the Falcon in the 80s, this would have been the story.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I agree.
So yeah, I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it's the whole miniseries is really worth reading.
Well, and I want to touch on one thing in issue 3. Falcon and Torque get into it, and he tells Torque, he says, "You know how I operate. I'm a humanitarian." And Torque says, "You're a chicken. You got yourself all convinced you're doing all this nice guy stuff. But the truth is you're so big on forgiving because you've never forgiven yourself." Going back to the Falcon's origin when, he was in fact a criminal,
right?
Before joining up with Cap. And, he brings up the fact that Falcon used to be a drug dealer and he sold to children, etc. And, I think that speaks to what you were saying earlier, his treatment of Miguel, his treatment of the gang members, etc. He's forgiving everybody else for this heinous shit because he's so full of self-loathing for himself and his past.
No, I think that's a great point, and I'm glad I'd forgotten that was even in there, and I'm glad you pointed it out because it does sort of retroactively make me feel better about the way that Falcon functions in that first issue, because it gives him that motivation, and he's he's trying to find forgiveness for himself for the things he can't forgive himself for having done in his own past. I also think it's really interesting, and what we had here in 2 of the 3 biggest black superheroes of Marvel's early days were criminals who went straight.
Right.
Luke Cage and Sam Wilson.
Yep.
And while they had to sort of keep it to a certain extent for Cage when they made the live action series, I'm so glad that they jettisoned it for the Falcon.
Well, absolutely, yeah. And that brings up another thing. I always think of listeners to this show who don't read the comics and only know these characters from the MCU. What's the name of the actor that plays Electro in the Spider-Man movies?
Jamie Foxx.
Jamie Foxx. Thank you. I couldn't remember. Of course, if you only know Electro from the movies, Miss Jamie Foxx, this black actor. Here in 1980s Marvel Comics, in issue 4 of the Falcon, we find out that Electro, who's a white character, is in fact a racist asshole when he calls Falcon very specifically boy, B-O-Y, which even in 1980 was not cool.
No, even in 1980, it was not a thing you wanted to have come out of your mouth.
No. So in reading back, I'd forgotten about that. And reading back over it, I'm like, wow, I wonder how that plays, with people who only know this character from the movies.
Yeah. Well, and again, Electro, in a weird way, was, all of Spider-Man's villain. He was a Spider-Man villain, really.
Right.
All of Spider-Man's villains were white guys, for the most part, in that era. And he was, in many ways, the whitest of the white guys.
Him or Doc Ock, yeah.
He had the silliest costume. That mask is just the dumbest thing to look at. So that's why, in a way, you get to this story and you have the sort of grittiness of the earlier issues, and now you have Electro showing up. And weirdly, when Captain America shows up, even though he and the Falcon had previously been partners, when Captain America shows up, he is sort of like intruding.
Yeah.
To me, because it's like he's now coming into the Falcon's world, and his kind of black and white, no pun intended, worldview is the polar opposite of the world in which the Falcon lives in this story.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Very interesting. But yeah,
So,
Electro.
highly recommend, folks, that you read all four of these. The summary that Chris and I did here, it just does not do it justice. Have these ever been collected?
Well, it's funny you should ask that, Brian, because they are collected in the thing that I'm holding in my hand right now, which is out of print, but I did find myself a copy because I didn't want to go downstairs. I was able to buy it for like $8. I didn't want to go downstairs and dig through my basement to find the original issues. In in a trade paperback called Avengers Falcon, which collects the 4 issues of the Falcon miniseries along with various issues of Captain America and the Falcon and Captain America and the Marvel premiere issue with the Falcon. So, yeah, it's a nice little collection.
So that brings us to the end of issue 150. I have to ask, episode 152. Of course, we're going to have J.M. DeMatteis, Cullen Bunn, Tom Snagowski, Scott Edelman, possibly Keith Giffen, all back on with us one last time. So you get the final pick for next week's episode 151. And what is it going to be?
It is going to be Moon Knight, issue 21, which features Moon Knight and Brother Voodoo and a bunch of zombies.
Oh, wow. Nice pick.
So just an opportunity to talk about Moon Knight and talk about Brother Voodoo. And the story itself is relatively trifling, but it'll be a fun opportunity to talk about those characters and about the Moon Knight series in general.
Awesome. Sounds good. All right. Well, folks, like we say every week, Chris and I do not get paid for the show. We do not charge for advertising. However, if you enjoy the show and you'd like to support it, the best way to do that is to support our engineer, Matt Wilderson. Matt has 2 podcasts that you can listen to for free, Grindcast and the Ghostwriters podcast. But he's also an author with several novels and short story collections available on Amazon.com. That's Matt, M-A-T-T, Wilderson, W-I-L-D-A-S-I-N. Support him in any of those endeavors, and you are, in fact, supporting this show.
Perfect. Well, Brian, what I say Excelsior, true believers. Thanks for listening to our rambling episode 150. Brian has Bell's palsy. I have no excuse for being so disjointed today. But we will see you next episode with Moon Knight number 21.
See you next week, folks.
Defenders Dialogue. You can listen to this episode and all previous episodes for free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play Music, and wherever else podcasts are available. Defenders Dialogue is written and produced by Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Our theme music is by Xander Harris. Our engineer is Matt Wilderson. Check out his books on Amazon.com.